Hello and welcome to another LiveFX tutorial. Well, actually, this is not a LiveFX exclusive tutorial because it applies to all our products. Today we're going to talk about setting up VideoIO and doing it the proper way. Now, my setup here is a Windows machine and a MacBook, and I will be outputting SDI from my Windows machine and capturing it on my MacBook. Yeah, let's start with the Windows system. I will create a filler, 100% color bars, drop them in here, double click, and as we can see with our waveform here, we're having a nice set of color bars starting at 100% white, going down to 0% black. All right. Now, if we go to the settings menu and to the monitors menu inside, we can see all our currently configured VideoIO outputs here, and among them, my Decklink 4K Extreme. What we can set here is the actual color space that we want to output, like Rec 2020 and PQ, for instance. So what LiveFX will do now is look at the source clips color space flags here in the media menu that say sRGB and Gamma 2.2. And it'll compare these flags. This basically tells LiveFX what the clip is in, what color space and what transfer function it has, right? This in itself does not trigger any conversion. It just tells LiveFX, hey, this clip has sRGB color space and a gamma of 2.2. And then LiveFX goes ahead and checks this against what my Decklink output is flagged with, Rec 2020 and PQ HDR. And since that clearly differs from what the clip is flagged with, it does a conversion from one to the other. It's that simple. For my NDI output, I could, for instance, say, hey, I want to go to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And here again, LiveFX will compare the clip's color space tags with the display's color space tags, and if they differ, do a conversion from one to the other. However, that is not what we're talking about today. So let me set this back to source, so no conversion whatsoever is triggered. What we're talking about today is here in the VideoIO menu. If I open that up, let's start in the upper left corner. This drop-down shows all the virtual and physical devices that LiveFX detects. Starting with the virtual NDI device, which has 4 output and 4 input channels. And down here, I have my Decklink 4K Extreme. Just on a side note, not only Blackmagic devices are supported, but AJA, Kona cards, and Thunderbolt devices are supported as well. Now, if I choose my Decklink here and make sure it is enabled, I can set an output resolution and frame rate here, pick something from this list. And in the lower half of the dialog, I can enable input and output channels. Now with my Decklink card, input and output are hard-coded. The first channel is an input channel, the second channel is an output channel, but there's also VideoIO cards that are bidirectional, where I can choose which one is input and output, or if both are input or both output, etc. All right, and now here comes the important bit. Up here, these two drop-downs in the upper right corner, where I choose my default output format, but also the default for interpreting incoming formats. And we'll get to that in just a bit. Now, the first thing we want to choose is whether we want to output YUV or YCbCr in a digital world that we live in, or RGB, right? Now, right now, I have selected RGB in 10-bit, and in the second drop-down, I can choose a matrix. As you can see, it also reads Rec 709 and Rec 2020, but we're not choosing color spaces here. We're choosing color spaces here in the monitors menu. What we're choosing here are YUV conversion matrices and video scaling. What does that mean? Now, all the entries up here from CCIR 601, Rec 709 and Rec 2020, these are irrelevant right now because we're not outputting YUV, we're outputting RGB right now. And then these last two entries are of interest. Do we output RGB video or full range? And here's the thing. Anything that is output as RGB, whether it's to a file in the form of a DPX sequence or AXR sequence, or through SDI. If it is RGB, it should be full range. If you stick to this rule of thumb, you are much less likely to run into any issues further down in the pipeline, because RGB is always associated with a full range image. While it's technically possible to also output it as video range, I would not recommend doing that, because the default in every ingest system and the default in many people's brains is that RGB shall be full range, encoded, decoded, interpreted as, etc. The contrary is true for YOV. If I was to output YOV, I should choose one of these matrices here, and we'll get to that in just a sec, and choose the video range matrix, because YOV, or YCbCr, the digital equivalent to YOV, is always supposed to be in video range, no matter whether it's encoded to file, like a ProRes or an H.264, all YOV-based codecs, or output via SDI or NDI. If it is YOV, it should be video range. This is the rule of thumb. And while technically possible to output full range, I do not recommend that. And we'll get to why this is or might be troublesome in just a bit. For now, let's stick to RGB full range. I will output that from here. So now these color bars are going out my decklink card as a full range RGB signal. Over to our MacBook, where we're going to capture the signal. Let's do a live setup and choose my Ultra Studio recorder. Hit create, and here are our color bars. Nice. Let's display our scopes. In here, set these to luminosity. There we go. Oh, and maybe, oh yeah, they're already at 2 times their size. Great. And as you can see, the signal comes in perfectly. We have a 100% white and we have a 0% black here. Now, let me show you what happens if we configure this incorrectly. Let me go to Settings and to VideoIO. Now, as you can see, up here I have configured my output format to YOV and Rec. 709 video, which is not what we're sending out from my Windows machine, right? We're sending out RGB full range. So why does our signal still look fine? Well, down here with our video channels, I can actually overwrite what I'm setting up here as my conversion matrix. Frankly, the VideoIO and LiveFX are smart enough to detect that what's coming in through SDI here on this channel is not YOV, it is RGB. And this dropdown allows us to overwrite anything that this dropdown has said. Basically, if I set this to default, this channel will listen to whatever this dropdown here says. But if I specifically tell it, hey, you are RGB full, and please interpret it as such, then it will take whatever I'm setting in this dropdown. Hence, our picture here is actually pretty good. We get 0% black, 100% white. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if on the capture side here, we do it wrong and we choose RGB video, what will happen? Let's apply. And let's see what happens. As you can see, our image is stretched. The black is actually going below 0 and the white is going above 100%, effectively clipping our image. Yeah, this is not good. This is why it's important to know that RGB is supposed to be full range and not video range. Because if you capture it or interpret the incoming signal the wrong way, you might end up with clipped parts of your image. Let's have a look at how this is the other way around and go back to our Windows system here. Open up the VideoIO menu and let's say we are outputting RGB in video range now. All right, let's apply this. Okay, and back to our Mac machine. And as you can see, our waveform is now correct again. We have white at 100% and black at 0%, right? Because we're also interpreting the signal correctly as video range. Now again, if we wanted to mess this up and set this to interpret the incoming signal as full range, look what we're getting. We're getting slightly lowered whites, so it's not true 100% white, but rather a very light gray, and also not a 0% black. It's slightly lifted to a dark gray, as you can see here. Because if we were sending out full range RGB and capturing full range RGB, the signal would get piped through 101. However, if we're sending out legal range or video range, and we tell our LiveFX system on the capture side that is actually full range, it will just take in the video signal as is. And this means lifted blacks and lowered whites, which is not good. Okay, but this is at least something you could detect, right? You would look at your waveform and see that your blacks and whites are not correct. And the fix is fairly straightforward. Either change this to RGB video to interpret the incoming signal correctly, or make the incoming signal correct in the first place and stick to that golden rule of thumb that I talked about earlier, and on our Windows machine set this to RGB full and send out RGB in full range. And this is the proper way to do it. Now let's have a look at sending YOV data. All right. So on our Windows machine, I will set our format to YOV 10-bit, hit apply settings, and since we're sending out YOV, I have to choose a proper YOV matrix, because LiveFX internally works in full range RGB like any respectable compositor would, right? So when we want our VideoIO to output YOV and not RGB, then we have to convert it from RGB to YOV. And when we capture that YOV signal, we also have to convert it back to RGB to, work with it inside LiveFX. This all happens under the hood, but it depends on choosing the correct settings here. And like I said earlier, when outputting YOV, you should at all times choose a video range matrix. And this matrix here dictates how the RGB content is converted to YOV. And there's two matrices of interest, the Rec 709 and the Rec 2021. What if you output P3 as a color space, you're asking? You would choose the Rec 709 matrix here. Anyhow, so let me choose the Rec 709 video range matrix, hit apply settings. Okay, there we go. And back to our LiveFX system on the Mac, capturing the signal. Going to the VideoIO menu, we will choose the correct matrix over here to capture, which is Rec 709 video. Apply the settings, and as you can see, we are seeing a perfectly fine set of color bars, 100% white and 0% black. Here's the same thing. If we choose to interpret it incorrectly as Rec 709 full, what we will be getting is lifted blacks and lowered whites. The other way around is actually much worse. So let's take a look at that. Let me go back to Rec 709 video. Thank you. And on our Windows side, we will now choose a Rec 709 full range YOV matrix. Apply settings. And looking at what we're now capturing, you can clearly tell there's something wrong with it. Because doing a YOV conversion to full range might actually clip certain image data. And this is what we're seeing here. And we cannot fix that on the capture side. See, if I now go in here and tell it, hey, actually we're sending YOV in full range, well, that makes my white white, but I still get this green stuff all the way here on the right. So this image information is actually clipped when outputting the signal. If on my Windows machine, just for the giggles, I go in and I scale the image down in terms of brightness ever so slightly, just like this, just a tiny little bit, as you can see, then as you can see here on the Mac side, the image appears fine. But if I leave things at 100% as they are, I'm getting artifacts. And this is something you would definitely want to avoid. So back to my rule of thumb, you want to output YOV always in video range to avoid these kinds of scenarios. This is also a thing that you would not have to communicate, because humans as well as machines associate YOV signals being with being in video range and RGB signals with being in full range. If you divert from that golden rule of thumb, it is something you have to communicate down the line, and you have to make sure everything is properly configured. And more often than not, you have to tweak additional settings in monitors, in ingest systems, talking to other people in your department to make them aware that what you're sending there is actually a little bit out of the norm. And ultimately, you might run into these artifacts that we've just seen. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, color space wise, what you want to send out, you do that here in the monitor menu, where you assign a color space to a display or VideoIO output. And here in the VideoIO menu, you are not choosing color spaces, but video formats and the corresponding RGB to YOV matrices and the image scaling, video or full. And while it's technically possible to mix it all up, the golden rule of thumb that I recommend to stick to is to send YOV or YCbCr signals in video range and RGB signals in full range, and your life will be a much happier one. All right, that's it for this tutorial. Hope this was useful to you, and see you next time.